Hello everybody. So today we're going to start chapter 4 and we're going to really start looking at functions and graphs and equations and kind of what all of that stuff means. So we're going to get started by just looking and comparing graphs and quantities and just kind of looking at them in a new way and determining like what do I think about graphs, what do correlations really mean. We're going to represent relationships using graphs, and then we're going to try and understand movement in a new way. And some of this stuff you'll probably see again in like biology, but I want to make sure that we make sure and cover it in math before we actually really get started. Alright, so I want you to just take and ponder for a minute. What words do you think or do you feel when you hear the words graph or graphing? So I'm going to put a few up here. Graphs can be, a lot of different kinds of things. So we can have all of these different kinds of graphs, circle graphs, bar graphs, line graphs. We can talk about temperature, we can have pie charts, we can have regular graphs that we use like in algebra class, like this one in the middle. So graphs are just a way of relaying information. So let's go ahead and start by analyzing a graph. So I have a picture for us. So this is a graph that shows a hot air balloon over time. So our variables, we see that it's labeled air in the balloon. Our variables are time and volume. So we're going to see what happens over time. So here I have a line that goes up and then a steady line, a line that goes up and a steady line, a line that goes up and a steady line, and then this line that goes up and this sudden drop right here. So let's talk about what that means for a second. So if we're thinking in time, so as time is happening, the volume is increasing in our balloon. So as time passes and the volume goes up, what do you think we're doing? Well, we're blowing air into the balloon. Well, what does this straight line here mean? Well, what do you have to do when you blow into a balloon? You blow, and then you have to take a breath. So you kind of pinch it and take a breath so that you can blow again, take a breath, blow, take a breath. And then what happens right here is that you blew and your balloon got so big that suddenly it lost all volume. So essentially what happened is your balloon popped. So that's what this graph means, is we're just looking at it in a different way. Alright, so why don't you go ahead, pause the video for a second, and I want you to think about these two pictures right here. Please pause and then we'll discuss in just a second. Alright, if you didn't pause your video, I need you to pause it now, for real. Okay, so what's happening in the one on the left here is that we have a certain board, like a 2x4 or something like that. And over time, what's happening to the length of our board? Well, let's see, it was the same length and all of a sudden it's shorter. Same length and then it's shorter, same length, it's shorter, and then the same length again. So you're probably using like a circular saw and doing that, where you're cutting off a piece of the board and making it shorter. For this one on the right here, we have a cell phone bill, and then the cost is the same, and then it increases. So we can relate this more to, instead of minutes, what if we called this data? So our data usage. And then the cost of our bill in relation to how much data we use. So if we are within our range of what we're allotted to have for the month, then our cost is going to be the same. But if we use more data than we pay for, our cost is going to increase the more we use it. The other thing that could be happening right here is maybe you're not using your data in this part, and then this part you are using your data. So these are kind of open to a little bit of interpretation. Okay, for this one we're going to be matching a table and a graph. So we have a band allowed fans to download its new video from a website. The table shows the number of downloads after 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and 4 days. So which graph represents the data in the table best? So if you look here, on day 1, there were 346 downloads. On day 2, there were 1,011. So what happened to our increase? Did it increase by the same amount, the 346, or did it increase at a greater amount? Well, I'd say increase at a greater amount. And then on the next day, what happened? Day 3, an increase at an even greater amount. And then by day 4, this band is just like ridiculously blowing things up. And it's just, they've had so many downloads. So what's happening over time is that the longer it goes, the more downloads there are. So it's not increasing at a steady rate. It's not increasing and then kind of decreasing like this one. It's definitely not decreasing. So my guess would be, the answer would be C, because we have some downloads, more downloads, even more downloads, even more downloads, and if the pattern increase, you know, it just continue to go up from there. All right. Hey, look, we're right. It's so smart. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and pause your video again and then see if you think A, B, or C is the correct answer for this one. All right, so for this one, we're gonna go ahead and compare and see like what happens to our sunscreen as we use it. When you have not used your sunscreen at all, you have 5 ounces of sunscreen. When you use it one time, what happens to your amount? Well, it decreases by 0.2. When you use it 2 times, what happens to your amount? It decreases by 0.2 again. When you use it 3 times, what happens to your amount? It also decreases by 0.2. So what's happening is it's decreasing at a constant rate. So we know it's not B for sure. So then we just have to determine, well, is it A or is it C? Let's see, we have 0, 1, 2, and 3 uses. After 3 uses, do we still have stuff left in our container? Well, we do. This one says after 1, 2, 3 uses, that's empty, so it's not that one. So our correct answer would be C. Hopefully you got that one. Okay, and then this one we're going to sketch a graph. So this one is also going to be a little bit open to interpretation. So we just kind of have to sketch it out. So I'm going to make a little table here in just a second. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to make a little table. So we need to talk about our variables and we need to label it. So we have a model rocket rises quickly and then slows to a stop as its fuel burns out. It begins to fall quickly until the parachute opens, after which it falls slowly back to the earth. Sketch a graph that would represent the height of the rocket during its flight and label each section. Okay, so we're talking about 2 different things. We're talking about over time, what happens to the height of the rocket. So our time goes on the bottom because that's our constant, our independent variable. And then height would go over here on the side. And then we need to label it. So let's label it rocket's flight. That sounds good. Because we're talking about the way the rocket flies. When I think of rockets, I think of red. So I'm going to use red to make the path. So it says a model rocket rises quickly. So let's see, we're starting on the ground and then it rises quickly. It says it then slows to a stop as its fuel burns out. So as we're still kind of rising, but we ran out of fuel. So we get up to the top. It says it begins to fall quickly, so falling quickly until the parachute opens, and then it falls slowly. So falls slowly back to the earth. There you go. So then we could just label each section, like this would be there we go. Sorry, I forgot words for a second. So this would be your initial flight, and then this would be where you ran out of gas or fuel. This would be falling to the earth, and then this part would be where your parachute opens. There we go. So we have everything labeled, and we have a sketch. Your sketch could look similar to this. It could look a little bit different, but it's going to have kind of the same general shape. All right, so are you up for the challenge? I want you to go ahead and see if you can draw this diagram. This one is a little bit tricky, so you have to think about what happens when you swing. Okay, so suppose you start to swing yourself on a playground swing. You move back and forth and swing higher in the air. Then you slowly swing to a stop. What sketch of a graph could represent how your height from the ground might change over time, and label each section? Okay, so go ahead and pause the video. I want you to think about this for a second and see if you can figure out what it would look like. All right, so we're going to go ahead and talk about this. So we've got our table here. Okay, so the two things we're talking about is time and height. What's happening to you as you swing? Well, do you start right away on the ground? Or when you sit on the swing, do you take your feet off the ground? So I'm going to say we start a little bit off the ground. And then as you lean forward and lean backward, you're going to gain momentum and height. But you don't ever hit the ground, right? Because you're keeping your feet off the ground. So we're going to go higher and lower and higher and lower and higher and lower. And then we're going to slow down and come to a stop here. There you go, extend the graph. Okay, so as you swing, of course yours is probably going to have a few more because you probably swing back and forth more than 5 times. So you could have a whole bunch on there, or you could have just a couple. What do you think would happen if, how many of you when you were in school, you like jumped off the swing when you got to the highest point so that you could see how far you could fly? Yeah, me too. So what would happen to our graph if we were at the highest point up here and then we decided to jump off? We're going to go down and we're going to hit the ground over here. All right, I hope that you had a great time. This is one of my most favorite lessons to do. Make sure you take notes on this if I didn't say that before. These notes should be in your notebook so that when I do notebook check, when we get to the end of the chapter, I will see them there, that you were present and you took notes and you paid attention. All right, have a great day. I'll have video 2 up in just a minute.